నేను సమాజం పట్ల బాధ్యత వహించే సభ్యురాలిగా ASER 2013 వార్షిక విద్యా స్థితి నివేదికలో వాలంటీర్గా వ్యవహరించడానికి నిర్ణయించుకున్నాను.
இந்த முயற்சியின் முக்கிய நோக்கம் குடிமக்களையும் அரசாங்கங்களையும் நம் தேசத்தில் உள்ள அனைத்து குழந்தைகளின் கல்வித்தரத்தை உறுதி செய்ய வைப்பதே.
पिछले 8 वर्षों में मेरे जैसे स्वयंसेवी दूर दराज के जिलों में यात्रा करके सुदूर गांवों में पहुंच पाए हैं.
We have gone from Kashmir to Kerala and from Gujarat to Tripura to conduct this survey and to collect information with the utmost sincerity. Today, along with 30,000 volunteers, I am going to be part of the largest citizen-led survey of India.
मु शपथ नेउची मो आगरु आसीथिबा व्यक्ति मनंकर कामकु निष्ठापर भाबरे आगेई नेबी ओ मो परे आसीबाकु थिबा व्यक्ति मनंक पई एक उदाहरण हेबी जेउ माने की मोर पद अनुसरण करिवे.
मी सर्वेक्षण तक्त्यात सत्य माहिती भरण्याचे महत्त्व जाणते आणि प्रतिज्ञा करते की मी हे काम पूर्ण प्रामाणिकपणे करेन.
জরিপৰ সময়ছোৱাত কোনো ধৰণৰ পৰিস্থিতিতে মই ভুল তথ্য সংগ্ৰহ নকৰো.
हम ASER कार्य में डटल रहब.
আমি শপথ নিচ্ছি এই মহান কর্মকাণ্ডের মর্যাদা ও গুরুত্বকে সর্বসমক্ষে তুলে ধরার
र मेरो पूर्ण सहयोग यस ASER भारत बनाउनमा दिन्छु.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the release of the 9th Annual Status of Education Report for Rural India. Each year, a very large number of volunteers and partner organizations come together to make ASER the largest citizen-led survey in India. Each year, over 30,000 volunteers help survey almost 600,000 children to assess their learning levels in language and basic arithmetic. This year is no different. Before we release the results for 2013, we would like to give you a flavor of what goes on behind the scenes. We have with us today some of our partners and volunteers, and I would like to invite them on stage to share their experiences with us. First up, I would like to introduce you to Sujata Sahu, a corporate professional turned social entrepreneur who heads 17,000 Feet Foundation. This is an organization that works towards strengthening rural schools and communities in the Ladakh districts in India. Sujata, could I welcome you on stage, please?
They both work. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. And at the onset, let me say we are really thrilled to be here, very thrilled to be part of this release. Very thrilled to be one of the partner organizations that led this very exciting, very large survey. To start with, even when I think of the word ASER, I mean, the word that comes to mind is it's such an audacious mandate to reach out to each and every rural village and check the status of education across the length and breadth of India. Not just that, I mean, to look at the outcomes and turn it into tangible courses of action. That's what we look at ASER, and that's what we did. So I'm not just kidding when I say length and breadth of India. We work in Ladakh, and not just any area of Ladakh. We work in all the remote, rural, really far to reach places of Ladakh. When we started out by mapping all of Ladakh. We started with mapping Leh district, which has about 370 schools. And we thought we'd seen it all. We reached out to each and every school to understand what status is there, what the schools look like. So when the ASER team came to us and said, when we partnered with them and we said, we'll take on Leh district. Now mind you, Leh district is like nothing you've ever seen. Leh district is 45,000 square kilometers of area. Mind you, that's one of the second largest district of India, second only to Kutch. And to give you a size of perspective, it's actually larger than the state of Haryana, larger than Punjab, larger than Kerala even. And to think, we were entrusted with the task of reaching out to a mandated list of schools, mandated by the ASER team. And the idea was to reach out to these villages and see exactly laid down by the mandates to see exactly what the status of education is. Now, in these 100 or in these 45,000 square kilometers lie lots of very tiny villages. Most of these villages have just a smattering of homes. Some have just homes, about 50 to 100 homes. Within there are really tiny schools. To give you another perspective, Manali starts, most of you would have been to Manali. Manali, the altitude of Manali is about 6,700 feet. Ladakh starts at 9,000. We start at 9,000 and we just go upwards and further beyond. The highest village, inhabited village, where there is a school is at 15,000 feet. And that's where our team and the ASER team and the set of citizen volunteers and people that we recruited, we reached out to so many remote schools. So, though we ourselves had surveyed the 370 schools and we knew exactly how many teachers were there, what kind of initiatives were being led, when the ASER team came, a very senior members came to Leh district, we were really pleasantly surprised by the level of planning and preparation they had made. You see, we weren't just let out into the open to say, go survey. We had a 3-day complete exhaustive training, and I mean exhaustive training. First of all, landing into the 11,000 feet altitude that the trainers came in, they got to work almost the very same day. We had recruited 30 people apart from our own team, and we were given a training on what exactly it means to be a citizen surveyor, what exactly does it mean to go into these villages. Despite the fact that they have very well laid out, very well structured framework. You see, one of the things that we think, from what we understand, is important to this entire survey is the standardization, is the fact that the results that come out need to be accurate. The results that come out need to be dependable. And reaching out to so many villages across the country is not an easy task. So the 3-day training was mandatory. We sifted through a lot of resumes, a lot of children, young adults, to come in and be a part of this survey. So, but that said, they had some very funny incidents, simply because Ladakh doesn't fit the rules. It's just not what you care to admit is the standard, is the norm. So give you a few examples. So they have, the ASER team came in and they have a set of rules. The rules start from how you, the list of villages that are chosen comes in from ASER. It's predetermined and it is based on certain criteria. Now that list of villages is given to us, and each of the villages, it takes 2 days. They say you are supposed to do a 2-day survey in each of the villages. All that's fine and dandy, and there is a procedure within the 2 days. But what do you do when some of these villages takes a day to reach? Some of these villages takes 3 days to reach. Mind you, out of those 3 days, 2 days are of walking. So when you've been allotted 2 days per village and you suddenly realize, oops, it takes a day to reach the village, a day to come back, that suddenly makes it 2. One of the villages on the list actually is a 2-day walk after driving about, I would say, 8 to 10 hours, maybe 12 hours. That's Ladakh for you. And mind you, nowhere in the ASER list they talk about altitudes. I think Rukmini, we need to include that. Altitudes, even reaching to any of the remote villages, you cross all the highest passes. Passes at about 17,000 feet, at about 18,000 feet. And that's kind of why we're also called 17,000 feet foundation. So some of the rules, when we sat down to it, though there is a larger framework, we sat with the team and the team decided, certain villages, 2 days is not enough. We had to do a 4 days. Then they have another rule. There was another, when you go into the village, you're asked to do, 20 villages per household, 20 households per village. If you walk around the streets of Haryana, you walk around the streets of Gurgaon or Delhi and you pick up a particular village, you can walk around the streets, you can pick those 20 houses. But I dare you to find those 20 villages, 20 households in a village of Ladakh. I wish I could show you pictures, but again, villages of Ladakh, there are some villages which have just some total of 20 homes. There are some villages which have just 1 home, and that's about it. But even looking at the villages, we're supposed to section off the village into 4 or 2 depending on the size and the shape of the village. Simple reason is, again, random sampling is important. You don't want to pick up the first 5 houses right next to the school. That's not what it is. The idea is to reach out to as random a population, as random a sample, and as wide a sample as possible. So we've done some really interesting things when we look at a village. And mind you, when you walk to a village and you're already huffing and puffing and you're wondering why you signed up for this, and you reach that village and then they tell you one of the houses on the list is way out there, you have to climb all the way out there. It's not an easy task. If you think you could run up the stairs in Delhi, you can't run up the stairs. You can't run up a little hill in Ladakh. It takes twice as hard. So our teams came up with some really innovative ideas on how to survey a village. So the way to do it is you look at a village, you survey it, you draw a little map, and these procedures are very well thought out and very well laid out. And the ASER team worked with us fantastically on this. So you draw a little map and you point out the set of homes depending on the conditions, and then you say, okay, these are the houses. Now how? When you're looking at 45,000 square kilometers, okay, larger than Haryana, and you're supposed to survey 30 villages, just do the math, people, and just it is really tough. So our teams have done some very interesting things, like they would say, let's find the highest point. The highest point in our villages would be the Gompa, the monastery. So step 1, walk up all to the Gompa and survey everything that's below you, and then make a picture of how the map of how the village looks like. Come back down, draw the map again, walk through households, mark the households that you want to survey. And then when you start, sometimes when you sectioned out the village into 4 sections, and each section you say, okay, section 1, I need to pick up 7 houses. But if the village is so sparsely populated, you have 1 house here and the other house is about a few, I'd say maybe a kilometer or 2 away, and that's how far apart the villages are, the houses are. Then you suddenly realize in the entire section, there is also something, the 5th household rule. You start with 1 household and you leave a few houses and go take on to the next household. Fine, I've taken the 1st household, 4 households, 8, I've taken the 5th, and suddenly I've run out of homes. That's it, my section's complete. So it's been interesting how we had to work with the team and say, these rules work, but for Ladakh, can we turn things out a little bit? And they had another, have any of you ever tried doing a route plan for 45,000 square kilometers of terrain? 30 people, maybe 6 vehicles, I think, 2 days per village, in some cases 4, like I said. And a lot of these villages, after you reach the village, you think you've reached the roadhead and you're fine, you can go to the villages, but most of these places you have to actually climb further in. But planning for so many, to go across the length of breadth of Leh district is nothing less than an adventure in itself. And I think the team that came, where are Mohit and Purnima, I think they can vouch for this. I have to tell you something else about Ladakh. You see, our team is all Ladakhi. They're there somewhere, all wearing 17,000 feet foundation t-shirts. So thanks for the plug, guys. So all of these guys, we have a lot of Ladakhis in our team, and all the people we hired were Ladakhis, all the volunteers who came in. Most of them have very similar names. If you take a few names like Stanzin, and you take Dawa and Namgyal, and you take Rinchen, you add a combination of few of these, you'll get most of the names. And we had 30 of them. And we sent them out. We had trained them very well. They went in very sharp, very eager to go. They've been very excited about the whole thing. But then we realized, okay, there's a Stanzin Namgyal going there, and there's a Stanzin Namgyal going there. What do we do? So we assigned them numbers. So our logistics and planning came from assigning them numbers, assigning them team leaders, as team leaders, and sending them out in the field. It's also interesting that when we had to go to recheck, there's another part of the procedure, you have to go to recheck. You go into a village and then you say, you have to recheck what the previous team has done. It's all fine and dandy until they tell you, to find the very house that has been done before is extremely tough. Because you go and ask them, where is Rinchen Dawa's house? They tell you it's right there. You take 20 minutes to climb there and find out it's the wrong Rinchen Dawa. I mean, it's been such an interesting ride, not just for us, and I think for my team as well, to understand what the larger picture is behind ASER. One is the field work, actually going in there, doing the tests and finding out how much you know or how little you know. But coming back today and being able to see, unveiled in this book, the results and how we can turn it back into action. So what we are doing today is taking these ASER, what we've learned from ASER, we're putting it into 17,000 feet so we can carry it forward and to make it into actual plans of action. So it's been a fantastic experience. So thanks to the ASER team, and we'll see you all next year. So thanks a lot. Okay.
Thanks, Sujata. Next up, I would like to invite on stage Professor Michael Walton, who is a lecturer at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. And I believe Professor Walton has been associated with ASER from its early days. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I've had a home in India for the last 6 years, and ASER became part of my life almost from the first month. I actually was working on working with the Poverty Action Lab on a cooperative endeavor with on Read India with Pratham. And in order to understand something about this, I did join a training program in UP for the ASER process, and we went out into the field, and I discovered some important things about the process. First, I discovered that villages in UP are actually very hot, and that increased my admiration for the work. I discovered that breeze had a whole new meaning in this context. Second, I did have a major disappointment. I had an aspiration to be asked to be one of the people who'd be doing the testing. And I did actually get to a standard 1 text, which I passed, but then I failed beyond that. And so I wasn't asked to become. But this, I think, is actually a comment on the quality control of the whole ASER process. And what I did observe was a quite extraordinary attention to how this survey instrument worked out, the training of the process, and the motivation of the people there. My second experience was actually not on the fieldwork of ASER, but using the ASER instrument in some research we were doing in Bihar and Uttarakhand. And in that case, unfortunately, we had to hire a survey company to do the testing, and we had ASER and other survey instruments. Now, this survey company had thought of another innovation to make it easier and quicker to test the children. What they did, and this was an innovation in the field, we like field-based experimentation, they didn't go to the children at all. What they did is they sat around under a tree and guessed what they might have got right and filled it in. Now, unfortunately, that wasn't tightly aligned with our research objectives. Fortunately, their errors were so egregious that we were able to kick them out and get our money back after some fights and other negotiations. Though I did, from that experience, not only learn about the extraordinary motivation under tough conditions that the ASER process manages, but the other substantive thing I did actually learn is we were actually cross-testing this ASER instrument, which is a quite remarkable instrument for its efficiency in a short period of time of gauging all those levels that you'll be seeing in the results. But we also ran much longer survey instruments, tests of the poor kids who had to be sitting there for. We actually ran a test to see if they got so bored it would make a difference. But we actually found that this ASER test instrument is a very robust test instrument. We were working with an educator, Shahabanu Vag, on that. And so I can certainly underscore the educational value of the instrument relative to alternatives. My experience, apart from following ASER intensively, and it is, you may or may not believe this, but when ASER comes out, whether I'm usually here or if I'm in the US, I actually eagerly look for the latest edition. I don't always as eagerly look at the results, but I'm not eagerly look at them. But as we will see, we are hopefully at a turning point. But I have that excitement. But I have also been working on the data, and it is we've been pooling the data, and it's quite extraordinary to be working with well over 1 million observations, which actually means you can do very different things that we're working on gender and the role of private schooling and effort. So with those notes, I'd like to say this is an extraordinary levels of motivation, a very high quality instrument, and valuable not only for its influence on public debate, which we need much more impact on consequences, but also as a research tool. So thank you very much.
Next up, we have two of our very own research associates. Anuradha Agarwala is one of the younger research associates, and this was her first ASER experience. And she's carried out the survey in the Maharashtra area. Apart from that, we also have Soumya Nair, who spent about 2 months in Kerala to carry out the survey over there. So I'm going to invite both of them on stage to share their experience with us.
So as a research associate, a large part of the job is to travel and to kind of oversee how the survey is going in the regions that we're responsible for. So in the month of September, I was in a district called Sindhudurg, about 100 kilometers away from Goa. And I had arrived in Sindhudurg and reached our partner college. And I met the principal over there, and we follow a procedure where we do a desk recheck of all the formats of the villages. So once the survey is complete in the villages, we look through those formats to see if everything seems to be fine. So I'd come to the college to do this procedure. I met with the principal. He said, why don't you go upstairs? There's a large hall. You can sit and look at all the 30 village formats. And I took the papers and I went upstairs and I thought, okay, now I need to start focusing on this job. And I opened the first village format, and by the time I looked up, the hall was filled with about 60 students who had done the survey for us, half the college faculty, a large podium like this on the side, and they'd put a table and some chairs, and suddenly it was a ceremony, and I was the chief guest, and I didn't even know about it. I just thought I'd come to kind of do this desk recheck. And this is an entirely Marathi-speaking population who did an entire ceremony in Hindi just for me. And they kept referring to me as the Mukhya Atiti from Delhi. And these people wouldn't have been much less younger than me. They touched my feet, and they asked me to be the chief of their prize distribution ceremony. And I got a bouquet of flowers. So it was a really different experience for me.
Hi, my name is Soumya. Warm welcome to everybody. This was my first time doing ASER as well, and I was in Kerala for 2 months doing the survey. If I remember correctly, it was a Sunday, on a very cold, rainy Sunday in Kerala. I was in a village in Trivandrum, and I was lost. I was standing in one corner of the village trying to find the center of the village as per our procedure, going around and around in circles for about 45 minutes. And like most typical Sundays are in Kerala, everybody's indoors, busy cooking, waking up late. I was all alone. I couldn't ask anybody for directions to find the center. And while I was also armed. I had household survey sheets, I had testing tools, I didn't have an umbrella, and I was looking for a cover. I was miserable, to say the least. So I was standing there and hoping for some kind of help from somebody. And I was making my way through this portion of the village. A man in very plain clothes walked up to me, a pretty buffed up person. He walked up to me and he said, "Who are you and what are you doing here?" And I usually try to pretend like I'm brave about these things. And I said, I'm here to do a survey. I'm here to do a survey based on education. I'm here to test children. So I'm thinking he'll take me seriously and not pull something funny on me. So then he says, "What are you doing here? So what are you doing at the center of the village?" I said, "I'm standing at the center." He said, "Yeah." I said, "Okay, then let me start the survey." Then he said, "What survey? I want to know what survey you're doing." And increasingly, I kept getting scared because he was really huge. And as you can see, I'm a really tiny person. He was about a good, I'll say almost double my height. And he was really massive. So he walked with me and he said, "Where are you going to?" I said, "I'm going to the first house here on the left. You want to come with me?" And he said, "Yes." And we walk in, and as soon as we walk in, the residents come out and they said, they see the person with me and they turn to me and they ask me, "Who are you? What are you doing with the cop?" And I said, "He's a cop?" And they said, "Yes, he's a cop." And I call out for the children, we test the children. And while I'm testing, the cop gets very interested. He said, "Oh, so what did they score?" And he knows all of them in the village. He knows who these kids are, which class they're studying in. So then, as the minute they found out that I was with the cop, and they said, it started pouring really heavily at that point. And they gave me the umbrella, and the residents of the first house gave me an umbrella and said, take the umbrella, finish the survey, come back and return it. And thankfully, we did that. I took the umbrella. With what started out with one house, we did about 20 houses in that village with the help of a cop, a police officer. So I think we can legitimately say that ASER was also done by a police officer in Kerala. So it was very heartening to hear and very supportive at the same time. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Next up, we have something very special for you. Each year, ASER kicks off with the National Training Workshop, and we've tried to capture the essence of this through a very short video. Could I request the video being played, please?
Railgadi.
Hi, I'm Mani from Tamil Nadu.
Ditambara, Delhi. Sunil from Uttar Pradesh.
Arjun from Bihar.
Osama, Kashmir se.
Adriya Gadad और मैं यूपी से.
Nazmal from Andhra Pradesh.
Dharampur, Bangalore, Solapur, Kuppal, Dindigal, Kuppal, Maslipatam, Ungol, Ungol, Koregaon, Mandabat, Shortnur, Beach Wale Station, Bol, Rukuk,
स्वागत सबको कोई छूटा तो नहीं सबको ले आयो ना
बीच वाले स्टेशन बोल रुक
On the eve of 1st August 2013, 128 state trainers from 28 states, along with visitors from Mexico, Britain and USA, arrived at Siwan, Bihar to attend the 5-day ASER 2013 National Training Workshop. The ASER initiative began in 2005. Each year, it reaches about 575 rural districts in India and measures basic reading and arithmetic levels of more than 5 lakh children in the age group 5 to 16. Close to 30,000 people across the country volunteer to do ASER each year, making it the largest independent, citizen-led survey in the country. It is also the only source of information about children's learning available in India. The ASER rollout begins each year with the National Workshop. Like every year, the 9th ASER National Workshop had a vibrant mix of state associates, master trainers, new participants, international guests and government officials. It was 5 days of rigorous training on survey methodology and sample tools, case studies, mock trainings, pilot field visits, role play, state plan meetings, all in the preparation for the months of field work that lie ahead.
I'm very impressed with the attention to detail, with the participation of the national master trainers and the way that it is interactive, the dedication of the participants. It starts in the morning at 9 and it can go on till 9 or 10 o'clock at night. And there is role playing, there are questions, there are feedback, there are quizzes. So it is certainly one of the best trainings I have ever seen.
The workshop readies each state member for what they will be facing in the field. By learning from the experiences of others.
3 daughters, Madhuri, Ankita and Shri.
सरपंच साहब अपनी बातों को खत्म नहीं कर रहे थे एंड शाम बीच में मतलब ऐसे नहीं होता, हम किसी की बात को तोड़ नहीं सकते।
बस कोई सरकारी पद नहीं है, इस टाइप का नहीं, तो शायद उसका मजाक बन सकता है।
By visiting a village and actually doing the survey. By meeting and interacting with village members and children of all ages in school and out of school. By individual commitment and team effort.
एक या दो लोगों के सामने मुझे बोलने में बड़ी दिक्कत होती थी। तो आज मुझको अगर 150 या 200 लोगों आदमियों के सामने भी बोलने को कहा जाए तो मैं आज बेहिचक जाकर के वहाँ पे खड़ा हो सकता हूँ।
ऑल ओवर इंडिया से लोग आते हैं तो एक दूसरे से बात करने का मौका मिलता है, एक दूसरे के कल्चर को समझने का मौका मिलता है।
By making a difference to society.
इसके डेटा जो कलेक्ट करके हम इवॉल्व कर रहे हैं वो डेटा के आधार पे हर स्टेट के गवर्नमेंट की कोई ना कोई प्लान हर साल इम्प्लीमेंट कर रहे हैं।
Yeah, I think to go to field have been very rich for us because we can see the complete procedure, we can repeat it like a pilot in Mexico City.
By believing in yourself to make a difference.
To see how we do ASER. We went out of the room, they called me and said, but these are very young people. But only young people can change the world. And अगर young लोगों को लगे कि हमारा देश बदल सकता है अपने काम से, तो जरूर बदल सकता है।
We are very well aware that it's a very, very large work that has to be done and many, many people who are involved. So we wish everybody good luck and we hope that when we all come together again with the report in hand, we have good news to report to the country.
By getting into the spirit of ASER.
నేను సమాజం పట్ల బాధ్యత వహించే సభ్యురాలిగా ASER 2013 వార్షిక విద్యా స్థితి నివేదికలో వాలంటీర్గా వ్యవహరించడానికి నిర్ణయించుకున్నాను.
இந்த முயற்சியின் முக்கிய நோக்கம் குடிமக்களையும் அரசாங்கங்களையும் நம் தேசத்தில் உள்ள அனைத்து குழந்தைகளின் கல்வி தரத்தை உறுதி செய்ய வைப்பதே.
पिछले 8 वर्षों में मेरे जैसे स्वयंसेवी दूर दराज के जिलों में यात्रा करके सुदूर गांवों में पहुंच पाए हैं.
We have gone from Kashmir to Kerala and from Gujarat to Tripura to conduct this survey and to collect information with the utmost sincerity. Today, along with 30,000 volunteers, I am going to be part of the largest citizen-led survey of India.
ମୁଁ ଶପଥ ନେଉଛି ମୋ ଆଗରୁ ଆସିଥିବା ବ୍ୟକ୍ତିମାନଙ୍କର କାମକୁ ନିଷ୍ଠାପର ଭାବରେ ଆଗେଇ ନେବି ଓ ମୋ ପରେ ଆସିବାକୁ ଥିବା ବ୍ୟକ୍ତିମାନଙ୍କ ପାଇଁ ଏକ ଉଦାହରଣ ହେବି ଯେଉଁମାନେ କି ମୋର ପଦ ଅନୁସରଣ କରିବେ.
मी सर्वेक्षण तक्त्यात सत्य माहिती भरण्याचे महत्त्व जाणते आणि प्रतिज्ञा करते की मी हे काम पूर्ण प्रामाणिकपणे करेन.
জৰীপৰ সময়ছোৱাত কোনো ধৰণৰ পৰিস্থিতিতে মই ভুল তথ্য সংগ্ৰহ নকৰোঁ।
हम ASER कार्य में डटल रहा।
আমি শপথ নিচ্ছি এই মহান কর্মকাণ্ডের মর্যাদা ও গুরুত্বকে সর্বসমক্ষে তুলে ধরার
र मेरो पूर्ण सहयोग यस ASER भारत बनाउनमा दिन्छु।
Thank you. We hope you enjoyed that video. I would now like to invite Dr. Chavan and Mr. Montek Singh Ahluwalia on stage, please.
Welcome to everyone. Old friends, new friends, without your support for all these years, believe it or not, it's been 9 years since we started doing this effort. We would not be here. I'd also like to thank some of our critics because in the tradition of argumentative Indians, I think we have benefited a great deal from also those who have provided us with criticism over the years. I don't want to hold up proceedings. I can see many people are standing, but just a couple of things. This year's among the highlights, and as soon as we start talking about the data, nobody is going to remember the hard work that actually goes into this. Among this year's highlights, I would say, starting from where you saw all this happen, which was in the heart of Bihar, till today, it's roughly about somewhere between 100 and 120 days. And as you can see, it is really this vast effort that working together we can create a report card for ourselves every year. The highlight of this year has been the involvement of diets. We've had 175 diets, which are the district institutes of teacher training, who have participated. All of UP, all of Rajasthan, large parts of Odisha, some diets in Bihar. And I think that these involvement of these going to be teachers has been a very important part of what we've been able to do today. The rest of ASER is done between NGOs and colleges. And I would say that our experience again with district colleges across the country has been very good over the last many years. And as we look forward to creating more mechanisms of accountability, measurement, assessment, I would strongly recommend that we look at these learnings from how institutions of higher learning have really come together and been able to do a lot of hard work. And we find that the further they are away from the center and the capital cities, the stronger they seem to be in their interest in trying to do something about the status of, in this case, education in the country. Next year will be our 10th year, and we invite all of you to send us suggestions. We think some changing of gears is required, and I think with so many people thinking on our behalf, we should be able to come up with something which may be slightly different in coming years. So with this, I'd like to invite Mr. Ahluwalia to release the report. He has been with us from many years from the beginning, and so I think it's very right that in our 9th year, he is the right person to release our 9th report. We'll just give you a quick glimpse of the main findings.
This is the 9th Annual Status of Education Report. ASER 2013 is the work of over 500 organizations, educational institutions, diets and groups who have led over 30,000 volunteers to cover 550 rural districts, serving almost 600,000 children in over 300,000 households across 16,000 villages. In 2004, the UPA government came to power and announced a 2% cess for elementary education, giving state governments the much-needed money to universalize elementary education. In 2005, we started ASER. The second term of UPA started in 2009, followed by the passage of the Right to Education Act. Almost 5 years have passed since this milestone. Terms of some state legislatures are coming to an end, while others have started a new term. India will elect a new parliament in 2014. So how far have we come? And where should we be going? Over the last 9 years, ASER has observed a substantial reduction in the proportion of out-of-school children. For 7 to 10-year-olds, the proportion dropped from 4.7% in 2006 to 2% in 2013. For 11 to 14-year-olds, there was a drop from 9% to 5% in the same period. Bihar stands out in its performance with a fall of 8 percentage points for 7 to 10-year-olds and 10 percentage points for 11 to 14-year-olds. In 2013, ASER observed midday meals being served in 87% of schools. The proportion of schools with usable water supply slowly increased to 74% in the same year. Of all schools visited in 2013, 53% had usable girls' toilets. In the previous year, this number stood at 48%. However, 31% of schools in 2013 and 27% of schools in 2012 still had girls' toilets which were not usable. ASER also observed an increase in the provision of libraries in schools visited, that went up from 63% in 2010 to 77% in 2013. ASER began collecting data on household assets in 2009, when an equal percentage of people were observed living in kacha and pakka houses. In 2013, while 30% families lived in kacha houses, pakka houses increased to 44%. Over the same period, households with electrical connections went up from 68% to 78%. And households with at least one cell phone connection went up from 60% to 79%. While India has been rapidly changing in many aspects, ASER observed some key changes in the educational landscape. Enrollment of children in private schools stood at 19% in 2006, which rose to 29% in 2013. Today, over 60% children in Kerala and Manipur are enrolled in private schools. Haryana stands at 54%. Punjab, Jammu and Kashmir, Uttarakhand, Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan and Meghalaya have 40 to 50% private school enrollment. Other states have private enrollment in the range of 30 to 40%, 20 to 30%, 10 to 20% and lower. In states like Bihar, West Bengal, Odisha and Tripura, where private school enrollment is low, the proportion of government school children going for private tuitions is very high. Clearly, there is a large number of states where more than 50% children receive private inputs in education. In another group, 35 to 50% receive private inputs. Education planning has traditionally focused on government schools in rural areas. This new element of large private school enrollment must be considered in future plans. ASER's biggest concern has been learning levels of children. These simple testing tools are used for one-on-one oral assessment of children. The proportion of children in Standard 5 who can read this Standard 2 level text remains virtually the same at 47% in 2013. However, this proportion decreased each year from 2009 to 2012. For children in government schools, 50% could read this text in 2009, which declined by 9 percentage points in 2012. Over the same period, the proportion of private school Standard 5 readers remained unchanged. For children in Standard 3 who were able to read this Standard 1 level paragraph, there was a slight rise from 39% in 2012 to 40% in 2013. Prior to this, a steady decline was observed. The breakup between private and government school-going children shows that improvements were largely coming from private schools. Children are still struggling with basic math. The proportion of children in Standard 5 who could solve this 3-digit division sum remains at 25% in 2013. However, between 2009 and 2012, there was a drastic fall of 13 percentage points. The fall was observed to be higher for children in government schools than those going to private schools. For children in Standard 3 being able to solve this subtraction sum, a steady decline is noticed since 2009, which remains more prominent for children in government schools. The proportion of children who cannot read even alphabets in Standard 1 is increasing in government schools, while it remains low and stable in private schools. This weakness at the base will affect reading in later years and cause an increasing gap between children going to private schools and those going to government schools. A child who entered Standard 1 in a government school in 2009 is now in Standard 5. There is a 41% chance that he or she can read a Standard 2 text or more today. However, if this child were in a private school, there is a 63% chance of being a story reader. Clearly, learning achievements were neglected for much of the last decade. But there is some good news. The Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan has taken the 12th plan forward and is asking states to focus on learning levels. While education is a concurrent subject of the state and the Indian Union, There has been a lack of political leadership in improving the quality of education in India at both levels, except in a few states. With new legislative assemblies and a new parliament in 2014, we hope that there will be more resolute action to rapidly and tangibly improve the quality of learning in our schools.
I would now like to request Dr. Madhav Chavan to address the audience.
Good afternoon, everybody. Yesterday I was at a conference organized by the National Council for the Protection of Children's Rights. And there too, a review of what has happened after the Right to Education Act was passed by the Parliament. The whole progress, or I wouldn't say the government didn't review the lack of progress, they reviewed the progress. And so I sort of prepared myself. Yesterday I had a net practice as to what I was going to say today. But having spoken there yesterday, I realized that really it is about a review. It's not so much about the 2013 results as you saw in what was presented in the audio-visual. As far as learning levels are concerned, not much has changed since last year. As far as school facilities are concerned, a number of things have changed. As far as household assets are concerned, many things have changed. Mr. Ahluwalia has been with us, as Rukmini said, almost since the beginning of ASER. I remember when we first met him with the idea of doing the annual status of education in late 2005. He was very encouraging, while some of the other members of the Planning Commission were a little skeptical whether this could be done at all. And we said, would you support us? And he said, yes, I'll support you. But he cautioned us that if you started taking government money to do this, then you'll be carrying a lot of baggage. And he was very right. And so we started the annual status of education report without any active or funds involvement from the government, and did it completely on our own. What we've done in the last 5 years is different. It's different from what many people expect. We are criticized for using untrained volunteers, and I was very happy to hear Sujata talk about the rigorous training that they received in spite of all the difficulties, because we do that. But we are constantly criticized for using inexperienced young people and doing a survey of this kind. We are criticized for assessing children through oral tests and supposedly not very rigorous tests, and so on and so forth. We've heard this criticism over the years, and then we are also told that there are others who are doing more rigorous studies and so on and so forth. But every year, whichever way you look at it, people come out with results that are different, but they all say similar things. The difference in what ASER brings out and what other surveys do not bring out is that we say so many % children cannot read. Whereas if you were to go to the NCERT surveys, today you will see that the NCERT surveys that were done in 2010 will tell you that UP scored X whatever percentile, etc. But what that score means is not known. Or in the report, you do not see the testing tool either. Exactly what are you talking about? We've asked many times, okay, so if you say that a child has scored 50%, what did you expect the child to score? That is not answered either. Did you expect the child to score 100%? That's not done either. So the simplicity of our method is the strength that we have. It may have weaknesses with it, and we don't pretend that this is the best and the final answer in all surveys. But I think over the last 5 years, if you look at the trends even, let's say you don't want to trust the absolute values of learning assessment, because that depends upon what you assess and so on. what has actually come across is clearly that up to 2009, what happened was the enrollment in schools increased. Since 2009, there was very little to do in terms of enrollments, and that last mile problem is still causing difficulties, and it is bound to. But after 2009, and this became a matter of controversy last year, especially when we first time said that learning levels have been falling ever since the Right to Education Act was put in place. And people asked us why this was so, and I don't think we really have an answer. But I think this is something that we should talk about. There are many things that have happened, and there are many things that have not happened. One of the things that we see in the survey, the increasing enrollment in private schools. Urban private enrollment was known. And we actually have seen when we worked in the cities in Mumbai and so on, and in Delhi, we've seen that children from the same community tend to go to government schools and private schools. And increasingly, the government schools have become more and more schools for the poor in the urban areas. And so they have the nature of being poor schools for the poor. And this segregation of children is a very dangerous thing in many ways. But at least what it does is it causes demotivation of an entire school system, demoralization, if you will. But I think there is an impact of this separation of the poor and the middle class, or the poor and whatever you call the rich. This separation is going to be harmful. What to do about it is a second question. But this is something that is happening. In a state like Uttar Pradesh, where villages are not like in Ladakh, where well populated, but there you see that 49%, today's results will tell you, 49% children in rural Uttar Pradesh are going to private schools. What this in effect is doing is every village down the middle is actually split into children going to government schools and private schools. Incidentally, NCERT comes up with this National Achievement Survey, which is presented by the government as a most rigorous, methodical, detailed survey. It's available. Anybody can read it. And it has concluded that the highest scoring, and comparisons are now with whatever that IRT method is, comparisons are allowed across the states. And the highest scoring state in the country is Uttar Pradesh. So congratulations to Uttar Pradesh. Except that 50% of the children don't attend schools. Teachers have a problem. When we go to actually teach in Uttar Pradesh schools, we find that children really can't even read simple words in 5th standard. But this is something that NCERT came up with. But the point is that in state after state after state, you're going to have a situation where now increasingly 50% or more children are going to be in private schools. And we, in planning for education, at least in the ministry, are saying that government is the largest single provider of education, which is true so far, but as we predicted last year, the numbers are increasing. This year, if you see in Kerala, there's a 10 percentage point jump in private enrollment from 60 to 70%. Maybe next year it'll come down a little. There are many things that keep on happening. Why did this jump happen is really beyond me. I was talking to Ashish as he walked in, devaluation of the rupee, more money coming in from the Gulf, getting more money, whatever else is going on. But if in a state there are 70% children, and I think Tamil Nadu is close behind, if so many children are going to private schools, then the government schools are actually in a minority. Should we not look at the scenario somewhat differently and say we need a different system? And let's not carry this baggage that government will actually be able to run all the schools and that's good for the people. I think we need to look at that. Uttar Pradesh, as I said, is 50%. Many of the states, as you saw, Haryana, Rajasthan following closely, this is happening. It is no more a question of whether private education should be given or not. It's already there and happening. Can you turn the wheels? I think this is a major question that everybody has to face. We are faced with many questions that we did not have before. And so, from different angles, taking a second look at how schools are run. Running schools which are public funded and locally managed may be the final answer. Locally managed in a different way. It could be the Panchayati Raj system, or it could be private people saying that I will run this school, a system, or whatever. I think this is something that we need to look at. Second issue that has come up is the Right to Education Act. Now, when the Right to Education Act was passed, many of us said that this is only a Right to School Act. But people keep saying that Right to Education Act does emphasize quality of education. Well, it says you must have teachers, you must have books, you must have uniforms, you must have this, that, and the other. What the Right to Education Act interestingly says is the teacher's duty, and this is something that we face when we go to work with the government, when we go to work with the schools. The teachers say we have to complete the syllabus. Well, they have been saying before the Act, but the Act has now actually codified that a teacher shall complete the curriculum in a specified period of time, which is within one academic year. Not only that, there is a curriculum and there should be goals to be achieved for each age, which is also a standard. Beyond that, the teacher also has to, through something very vague called the continuous comprehensive evaluation that actually nobody has figured out, has to evaluate every child, and if the child is lagging behind what is not clear. But if the child is lagging behind, then the teacher must act so that they are brought up to that level of the grade. If you put all these things together and everything else we know about the government school system or any school system, this is an impossible task. This is not going to work out. There are many other reasons why this is not working out. A, what does it mean to complete the syllabus or curriculum? What does it mean? There is a national curricular framework which says you must teach children to learn. Which doesn't mean you teach the textbook. You have textbooks. And then there is, from the national curriculum framework, you go to the state curricula, and then you go to the state textbooks. And finally, everybody thinks the textbook is the syllabus, and that has to be completed, which means if I teach these 20 lessons, my syllabus is complete. That is the simple translation of what it means. And when you try to do that, if 50% or more children are not being able to read at 5th standard, forget about 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, they too have lessons, they too have textbooks, then what is exactly going to happen? When, yes, and we've found it, many people have found this, that the teacher only teaches to the front of the class. Or some children, and others are going to lose interest. And we've been saying almost since 2005, since we found out or quantified this issue of children not being able to read, in spite of all other criticism, we have felt that this country must make good reading a central agenda of education. The same thing about numeracy, math. Whichever way you want to teach math, we don't claim to be the experts in teaching math, but we know that even in 3rd and 5th grade, children can't even identify numbers. Now, if you can't identify numbers, I suppose there's a way of doing math logically without numbers. I suppose there is, and some people do say that you can do math. Of course you can. Except that you can't take it to the baniya shop and say, I'll do all the math without your numbers. So if this is to be taught, these are key areas, and textbooks, instead of being aid to learning or teaching, are now becoming obstacles. We have to say that the textbooks are there, but it's not about completing the textbook. It is about reading this material and thinking about what it is. And this is what the National Curricular Framework says. But it is never translated below because you have to complete the curriculum within 1 year. The second aspect that ASER people have been emphasizing is this: in this country, and this is interestingly could be the success of Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan as well, that now, and our surveys show that in 99% of the villages, there is a school within walking distance. That's success. The problem is there are more schools and smaller schools. And the smaller the schools get, the more multi-grade schools you have. So in a school with 2 teachers, one of them absent normally, you have children with different grades, different levels, and this one Durga, or whatever the other male counterpart of that is, has to do everything. It's not possible. You may say put more teachers on the job. That is also probably not possible. I think we have to look at a different thing altogether. What are these small schools? I would submit that these should be really daycare centers. And maybe for learning something else needs to be done. And it's possible. But it's not just economics. The private schools, what they're doing is, if you look at the DICE numbers, the number of private schools are not increasing, but the private school enrollment is increasing. So what is happening is one school is actually growing in size, and it is busing kids from all over the place. Is that good for the children? Not really. Not good to travel 15 kilometers to a school. But that, in fact, is what the private schools are doing. I'm not saying compete with them, but we've got to find different solutions. You cannot have this curriculum business. You cannot have, while the small schools are good, actually they may be coming in the way of teaching. We still haven't moved far. We've been saying that we're going to have connectivity all over the place and we'll use internet and stuff like that. We have not moved fast enough. I think there is a need to take a hard look at what else is changing on the ground. There are other things. Distractions are increasing. Urbanization. Villages are emptying out. Increasingly in the Kerala, where's Remy? Somewhere. So she was in Kerala surveying, just like Soumya was, I suppose, and they say that the schools are fine, government schools are good, very good looking, nicely maintained, good teachers, and yet we find that children are going to private schools. So what's going on? Exactly what is going on. I think we need to take a very close look at this, and very quickly. We cannot start a study today and submit the report in 2019. There's no time. The other last thing I would like to mention is when the government plans, now Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan has started focusing on first and second. We've been saying that for the last 10 years. The problem is more immediate and urgent. When young people go out into the job market, they really don't have. We are trying to do vocational training, and we find when the kids come for vocational training, they really don't have reading comprehension, they don't have listening comprehension, they can't measure, and they're supposed to go for jobs. How is this going to work? So from top to bottom, almost for all kids, young people, starting at, say, age of 5, 7 to 17, 18, you really have to have a massive abhiyan, basically to read, comprehend, speak, measure, and calculate. If that can be done, I think we'll have created a large base for movement forward. You cannot say start with 1 and 2, because the moment you say that, every state government goes after 1 and 2, and as the third, 4th, and 5th is to be, nobody says it should be neglected. Of course, the teachers are teaching there, but those kids don't know how to read either. So, thank you for being with us for the past 9 years. And I'm glad that the Planning Commission took the initiative to bring the focus to learning outcomes last year. Now the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, after 1 full year, has started moving the state saying we should do learning outcomes. Now the new government, whatever that government is, will come and we'll find out again if that sustains or does not sustain. I think there have been too many delays. There's much more urgency out there, and somehow at the policy and understanding level, just because we want to stick with the old form of thinking, we have not moved forward. I hope in the coming year, we will actually see a lot of change. But I really want to say to this audience and whoever is watching on this webcast, that if it wasn't for Mr. Ahluwalia's quiet support, it would have been difficult for us to start and keep going. So thank you very much. And I suppose I invite you now to address the audience.
Thank you very much, Madhav. Well, let me just say that I should especially thank you for these actually quite undeserved comments about all the support. I've certainly applauded ASER. I'm not sure whether that counts as support. You must have received a huge amount of support to launch such an extraordinary data collecting endeavor. And I must say that unambiguously, the cadre of volunteers that you've created and the kind of nation building you're doing there, all those enthusiastic young kids who are committing themselves to doing their job properly, etc., that's probably not a small outcome of this whole thing. There's no doubt in my mind that the studies, the results that ASER produces are extremely important. We, in fact, recognized their importance by highlighting that what they were saying is extremely important for education. I think both the 11th plan and the 12th plan draws attention to ASER. So I think one or two comments I want to make. I think this is a very rich database, and it would not be fair to all the people who've done work on it to sort of appear to be summarizing, because the honest truth is I'm going to take that report and go through it very carefully to highlight what I think is worth putting across. I don't know if there is press present here, but I think if they are, I would very strongly advise them to look at the report very carefully, because it does produce an amazing amount of information. And I think we ought to sort of give a bit of a bird's eye view of some of the issues that come up. One, and somewhat obvious, I mean, it's quite clear that the results in terms of learning achievements have to be described as surprisingly disappointing. Most people would not think that kids in standard, whatever, 8, will not be able to. I mean, just to mention the numbers, for example, according to the latest data, children in standard 6 to 8, if you focus on their mathematical ability and you simply talk about division, not, I mean, you know, the earlier one talks about subtraction, but if you talk about division, then according to this data, only about only 40%, actually 39%, 38.9% of all the kids can actually do a division, which would normally be done at much lower grades. And if you look at learning achievement for the same category, well, 66%, but that means that 34% actually can't read simple texts that are meant for much lower grades. Now, you know, by any standard, that is not what you expect. When I asked this question in the ministry and use their data, I mean, they also have different ways of measuring school achievement. One of the pictures that comes out of this, which I think was brought out in the earlier slide presentation, is that there actually doesn't seem to be an improvement. As a matter of fact, there's a deterioration followed by stabilization. When you look at the official data, what comes out is steady improvement. Okay. Now there are two issues here that one has to consider. First, of course, the official data, which talks about the number of kids getting X% or whatever it is, they are actually based on tests administered by the schools themselves, whereas these are really tests administered by independent surveyors finding kids in a random sample, and not really what comes out of the school. So there is this issue that could it be that the school system, there's a very strong incentive to actually show that kids are learning a lot. Because after all, if you're part of the teaching or the management, you would have that incentive. I'm not saying that there is a bias, but this is an issue that one has to keep in mind. Second thing is a lot of the national data are national, and this is really rural. So it's very important to remember that the R in ASER is for rural. And you know, now that we have 30% or 31% of the population urban, we're really looking, admittedly, at a very large part of the population, but we're not actually reflecting what's happening in urban areas. Now, this raises an interesting question. If it turns out that the urban ratios are much better, if it turns out that the urban ratios are just as bad, that's an unmitigated disaster. If it turns out that the urban ratios are much better, then you would say the national average is not as bad, but the difference between rural and urban is huge. And the whole question of inclusiveness, and are we giving an equal chance for kids in rural areas to move up whatever ladders are provided by the inclusive growth process, the answer would come out very stark. So I think one needs, the first conclusion that I draw from this is it's very important that ASER do an urban survey also. That will not lend itself to quite the same sort of acronym, or you'll have to find something which sounds appropriate. But I think there should be an urban survey because it is important to know what the differences are. It's not that expensive, and I'm sure that you should, in addition to the 2% cess, which the UPA government put in order to provide more funding, you now have the corporate social responsibility, 2% of corporate profits recommended to be used for corporate social responsibility. And I'm sure you would be able to find people who are willing to contribute. So the survey should, in my view, the next one should be done in urban areas. Very important that we do that. That's point number one. I think the other point is that, in earlier results, which Wilma used to produce very persuasively, she drew attention to the fact that the outcomes in private schools are much better than in public schools. That is actually universally true in many, many parts of the world. And the better results have to be statistically evaluated. I mean, is it that the kind of kids who care about education send their kids to private school? Maybe wrongly, under the mistaken impression that private schools are better. And of course, the kids end up being better because the parents spend a lot of energy on the kids and all the rest of it. So I remember that you had done some analysis and you came to the conclusion that if you bung in the statistical testing of quality of the education level of the parent, or maybe the asset level of the parent or something, then some of the difference gets explained away, but some difference remains. Now, I don't know if that's been done for the 2013 survey, but if it hasn't been done, it should be done, because we need to know whether that is happening or not. A third thing that's very relevant is that the variation across states, and this is something that the press, if there is anyone from the press present, should really focus on. The time trend, if you want to tease out something positive, you can, at least on things like facilities and so on. It's once again, the glass was 35% full and it's now 55% full. I mean, it's not as if even on the facilities indicator that we have it all, but it looks as if that's improving. Boundary walls, toilets. I like the distinction between toilets that were there but locked and toilets that were unlocked and usable or not usable. But even if you restrict your focus to toilets that were unlocked and usable, there is an improvement. However, I mean, the gap is quite large. And that's true in a lot of our social indicators data. So those who approach this data from the point of view of have we achieved satisfactory universal access, you should just fail the system straight away. There's no doubt that we haven't. On the other hand, if you're trying to look at the data and say, well, of course, that's going to take a lot of time, but is there improvement in the provision of infrastructure? I think the conclusion is there's improvement, though I think it's very fair to ask, should it have been more? And that's always a relevant issue in all our inclusiveness data. But having said that, that's all inputs. And I think, I don't know if Jean Drez is here, but I think somebody told me that Jean had described the Right to Education Act is actually the Right to Educational Facilities Act, because we are focusing too much on inputs. Are we providing all the inputs? That's important. Because if you don't focus on the inputs, you can, I mean, if you don't have a school, you can be pretty sure there's not going to be much learning improvement. But going beyond the facilities or the input side to outputs is actually quite important. And that's what this survey does. One of the differences between the official data, which actually look at kids in school and their performances, and this data, which actually looks at kids, whether they are attending school or not. I mean, enrollment is one thing, but many kids are enrolled in schools and simply not attending. So the ASER data is actually capturing, if you like, the lower levels of achievement in kids who may be enrolled but are not actually attending school, whereas the official data are based only on tests taken within the school. So there is a difference, and therefore you would expect that the ASER data would be worse than the national data. But having said all that, an interesting story is the interstate variation. And I don't know whether some analysis has been done on what explains this variation, because the variation is not only large, but it's actually also counterintuitive. I mean, for example, let's take standards 7 to 8 and let's look at the mathematical test of being able to do division. According to the table we have, for the country as a whole, the kids who can do the division are 39%. Now that doesn't look good by any standard. On the other hand, it's as high as, it's 51.9% in Andhra, as opposed to, and this would be quite a surprise, as opposed to 30.9% in Tamil Nadu and 54.5% in Bihar. So that's a big plus for Bihar, that the percentage of children in the class 6 to 8 who can do division is 54.5%, whereas in Tamil Nadu, which is widely regarded from an educational advancement point of view as quote unquote a better state, the data only say 30.9%. Now that, I mean, I must ask my friends from Tamil Nadu, there must be some explanation, or they can just say there's a statistical bias. But I can give lots of, if you go through this, you get lots of, I mean, it's interesting, for example, that in Punjab, the mathematical ability of these kids is 61.7% can do it, again, compared with Tamil Nadu, 30.9. That's again, I mean, although I come from Punjab, it's a little counterintuitive. I wouldn't naturally have asserted that they would be better. But I think we need to go into this. And the interesting thing, by the way, is that these kids are being compared on two different metrics, mathematics and reading. But these differences seem to be consistent across both. That's worth doing a little bit. I can see that Wilma is already working out exactly how is she going to sort this out, but I think you should sort this out. Now, come back. What do we do about it? I mean, it's quite clear that we have to carry on doing the provision of funding, etc., for education. It has to come from the state. It does raise an issue that must we necessarily be following a strategy that we must have enough government schools for everybody to go to. When you know the most educated state, again by common consent, is Kerala. And in Kerala, the percentage of kids who go to the private school is actually amongst the highest. I mean, Kerala has 69% of kids in Kerala go to private schools, whereas only 29% of the national percentage go to private schools. In Bihar, only 8.4. Now, it's quite clear that where you don't have private schools, I think the state has to do its bit. But where you have private schools, and where you have the possibility of private schools coming in, should you be rolling out a public school system? That's an important issue. This goes into something a little more controversial, and that is, are you better off offering a lot of scholarships and letting kids go to private schools than setting up public sectors? A very controversial issue. And for the benefit of the press who will no doubt report this, I want to categorically say that I haven't made up my mind. But I do think it's an open issue. It's an open issue because if you look at the states across the country, the prevalence of large-scale private school education is very great. Now, Madhav made, by the way, all this we are talking about is rural. I don't know what the urban situation is like, and probably quite different. I don't know how it varies across states, which is why you should do this other survey. But the thing is that there are experiments being done to promote some sort of state-supported method of encouraging more private schools. The Ministry of Human Resource Development, as part of our plan initiative, is just about to unroll. There was a big program of putting in 6,000 model schools in backward blocks. 3,500 of these in areas where there's not likely to be any private school involvement. or potential are going to be set up in the state-forward public sector model. 2,500 are going to be set up in a public-private partnership mode. Now here, the basic principle is that they must get the land themselves and do the capital investment themselves, but they can sort of offer to take in X% of people from the free, in other words, and sent to them, as it were, by the educational system, for which they will be compensated at the same rate as the state spends on private schools. But for the others, they can actually charge whatever they like. Now, actually, this percentage could be as high as 75%, and in fact, it could be 100%. So they have a choice that, you know, they can offer their services if they can do a better job, providing they're paid on a per capita, per student basis equal to what the state is otherwise spending. Now, linked to this, by the way, is the question of the issue of accountability. Why is it that private schools think, every private school that I talk to is convinced that they can do a better job? One of the arguments really is accountability, that in the public school system, we're not actually able to enforce accountability that would actually make the teachers do what they should be doing. And that's one argument. The private schools assert that they can, whether it's true or not. I mean, this is something that we need to do a little bit more research on. So one is accountability. The response of the government is that actually the problem is lack of training. So every school teacher should have a B.Ed, okay? As a consequence of which they would, of course, get a corresponding larger salary. Now, that's undoubtedly necessary when it comes to middle school and higher school. Many people argue that at the primary school level, that may not actually be necessary. And some of the research that I've seen, and this is getting back into evidence-based sort of analysis, some of the research I've seen, Karthik Muralidharan has been presenting a lot of papers around, and maybe some of the audience are aware of his work. I mean, he finds quite an interesting proposition that, you know, the cost of private school salaries is 1/3 or even 1/4 of the public school salaries. And as a measure of output, the output is no worse. So he's not actually saying that the private schools are better, but he is saying that the private schools seem to be producing the same measure of output at a variable cost, which is 1/4 per student. So these are issues of design that have to be somehow or the other factored in. Madhav mentioned a very important point, and that is this whole business of the emphasis on completing the syllabus, combined with the new requirement, which is actually a legislative requirement, a statutory requirement, that children cannot be held back. So if just imagine to yourself the consequence of the teacher has to finish almost certainly an overloaded syllabus. I mean, almost certainly. At the same time, the teacher is dealing with children whose learning and comprehension ability may well be below what is a minimum. There are good reasons for it, and the reasons are not, in my view, natural intelligence. I mean, look, these are kids whose parents are not educated. So first generation learners always have these problems. 20 years later, we may not have these problems. But as long as we have children coming into the school whose parents are not educated, we are going to have this problem. You know, a heavily loaded syllabus virtually certainly means that any child who's not actually able to follow what the hell is going on is simply going to drop out. He's going to be in the same happy position as the kid on the tree up there, which is a sort of, you know, slightly opted out but enjoying himself. And I mean, you have to ask the question that, you know, what exactly is the teacher supposed to do? Now, obviously, the remedy lies in a lot of remedial education, a lot of special tailoring, probably almost certainly lies in less ambitious demands for curricula. But there is the issue of whether automatic promotion to the next class, irrespective of performance, is a good thing. people vary on this. I mean, this is an area of expertise, and I don't have it. But it is true that many many educationists say that's the right thing to do, and others say, well, it may not be. So, I mean, these are some of the issues that have to be thought about. From our point of view, we have started the process of the midterm appraisal of the 12th plan, and many of these issues we will be focusing on. Of course, the appraisal itself will be produced after the new government takes over in May of this year, and therefore the new Planning Commission will actually take a final view. But we are doing some of the background work and posing these things as issues. So one of the things that I would request Pratham to do, and anybody else here who's interested in education, think of what you want to put into the midterm appraisal, which would be, if you like, a corrective step on some of the things that have already been done as far as the Right to Education Act is concerned. And I think this is the time to do it, because plans, of course, once programs are done, it's not so easy to change. But the fact is, there will be a 13th plan being prepared within a year and a half from now. And that is the time when, if you want to make a change, you make that change. For that purpose, a first-time ASER report, not ASER, but ASE urban report would, I think, be a very, very useful thing to have. So, Madhav, thank you very much, and my congratulations to the whole team who analyzed the data, and of course all the thousands of volunteers who've actually participated in this very important task of nation building. Many congratulations and thank you.
Before Rukmini starts her vote of thanks, just wanted to supply some information. The NCERT survey actually says there is no difference between urban and rural achievements, according to them, in their survey. And then the R in ASER stands for report. So we are going to do ASER urban. Well, it's something that has been on our minds. But on behalf of Willima, I'll say you will need to give a big push for her to get the urban sampling frame, and she's not been able to get it. So if you can facilitate that, then I think it'll be a lot easier for us to do. But we'll be thinking about that. And yes, these this part about not keeping a child back, there is a way out. You have to say a stage-wise. We've been recommending that. They don't say you have to start reading by the time you're 7. That's not the point. Between 7 and 10, you should become a fluent reader. Now, it could be 7 and 10. In some states, it is possible because of the way the scripts are, because of the way the words are. It is possible that the children will start learning to read a little later. Now, these are things in which there is no research. We have not researched reading at all in this country. All we have done is education in so-called language. So that one part is left untouched, and we need to do a lot more serious research in all these areas, for which I don't know whether the government is going to provide money or not. And the likes of NCERT, SCRTs, I'm sorry to say, but there's not much going on there.
I'm not commenting.
I didn't want you to comment. That's why I had the last word. Thank you.
I think it's a good idea to propose the vote of thanks. We are always very thankful to Mr. Ahluwalia for, I had thought that this year's work is done and maybe tonight we shall go home and sleep for a few nights. But looks like, Willima, you start working on the urban one right away. It's been really useful to get these kinds of comments from you. We welcome further comments, not only from you, but from others in the audience, because one of the things that we really hope the ASER survey does every year is come up with more thoughtful ways to look at the issues that we face. So thank you very much, everyone, not only for coming today, but for your ongoing support. We couldn't offer chairs to everybody, but we do have tea outside. And hopefully, for the people who are standing, more cups of tea than for the people who are sitting. Thank you very much. The reports are outside, so do pick up a report as you do. Yeah, and the tea is in the garden at the back. Thank you.